My name is Quincy Wilson. I am a football coach at West Virginia University, and I am Black in Appalachia.
It's not just about demonstrating or doing, it's about enlightening and educating people of all races, to make people aware of what's going on.
Hey, podcast listeners, this is Dr. Nkechi Elamine
and Alana Norwood,
and we have a new episode of the Black in Appalachia podcast. It's a bit different, but we think you'll enjoy. So our folks at Arts Build Chattanooga invited us to speak at their first Equity in the Arts conference on September 10th, 2021.
And this conference is intended to really highlight Chattanooga's local arts and culture sector, to have critical conversations, and to engage with others around opportunities for more equitable arts futures.
So since we were going, we thought that you all might also want to go. And so this episode of the Black in Appalachia podcast comes from our conference presentation, which was the final presentation of the conference. Again, we hope you enjoyed. What a lovely day it has been so far. Thank you all so much for inviting us to be a part of this very first Arts Build Equity in the Arts conference. As folks who follow James and the works of Arts Build, we are delighted to be here and to share and to learn with you all. I am Dr. Nkechi Elamine. I'm a sociologist of race and place and Black Appalachian experiences.
My name's Alana Norwood. I am the co-host for this podcast and community archivist for the Black in Appalachia Initiative.
And you all are experiencing the Black in Appalachia podcast.
So just to give you a little bit of background about us, the Black in Appalachia Initiative is a research, education, and support organization that works in collaboration with East Tennessee PBS, residents, university departments, libraries, archives, and community organizations to highlight the history and contributions of African Americans in the development of the Mountain South and its culture. We do that through research, local narratives, public engagement, and exhibition. Black in Appalachia is a community service for Appalachian residents and families with roots in the region.
And so usually when people think about or hear about Appalachia, we're not exactly who they think about, right? And so we developed this podcast as an extension of our larger project as a way to get the narratives of Black Appalachian people into the forefront of our conception of Appalachia. So we want folks to think about Black folks when they think about Appalachia as well. We also want to be a reflection and a representation of Black life in the region for people who are from the region, people who have familiar ties to the region, and people who just want to know about Appalachia.
The Black in Appalachia podcast is a production of Public Radio Exchange and East Tennessee PBS, and we launched a year ago.
And so our podcast is a chat-style podcast, and we tell historical stories, contemporary stories, stories that bridge the historical and the contemporary. We challenge misconceptions of the region while highlighting Black people and Black places, and we do all of this while having a good time. So first, before we get into the business of this conference, we just want to acknowledge that we are in Chattanooga, like literally in-house at Arts Build's building, and we're really excited to be here. Chattanooga and Knoxville has this interesting relationship, and we feel like you all are like our second cousins who went away and never come back. Don't ever come visit us. We don't see y'all, but we still have lots of love for you, and we miss you. So it's really nice to be able to connect with folks in Chattanooga and to be here in person.
And, we know that folks are iffy about claiming Appalachia because there's this whole stereotype of poor, white, mountain folk. That's just the image of the region. But Appalachia does have cities like Chattanooga, so that makes y'all a part of Appalachia too.
And so speaking of Chattanooga being a part of Appalachia, I can't tell y'all how proud I was when I was talking to James and Monica in preparation for this conference. And James said he was a fan of the podcast and that this is one of the only places where he hear people who sound like him. And that just really resonated with me because usually when we think of Chattanooga, it's just sort of associated with the South, not Appalachians. It just really felt good. Like folks here can see themselves in the work that we're doing.
So as we said, we are so happy to be here. Thank you guys for having us. We are based further in East Tennessee, Knoxville is, whereas Chattanooga is more of the southern part of East Tennessee. It's nestled in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, and it is the fourth largest city in the state and is located on the border of Georgia, but y'all already know all that.
Yes, y'all know that. But just for our listeners, we want to make sure they know where Chattanooga is and what we're talking about. So usually when people think about Chattanooga, they think the Tennessee Aquarium or Bessie Smith or the Chattanooga Choo Choo, Lookout Mountain, hand gliding, and all kinds of outdoor activities. I know for me, the last time I was here was to go visit Ruby Falls. I'm sure that you all get a lot of energy around the falls.
People who love outdoors definitely love Chattanooga. I want to give a shout out to my girl, Becca. She stays on the trails, but seriously, y'all, like this is such a scenic city. I'm sure the folks from Chattanooga, y'all all have your own things that you associate with your city. So feel free to drop some things that you like to do in the chat box below.
For sure. And we are not able to see the chat, but we definitely will take a look at some of those things. And I think that, regardless of what you all drop in that chat, I feel like after our time here and hanging out with the Arts Build crew last night, for us, Chattanooga is going to be known as Hospitality City. We had a great time. So thank y'all for showing us love. Shout out to the Arts Build crew and shout out to Chef Kenyatta for that amazing food at Neutral Grounds last night.
So good. Okay, so now for the business.
Okay, when we were invited to speak at this conference, we thought about the idea of equity in the arts, right? And we thought about where do we hear conversations about equity? And we realized that when we hear people talk about equity in the arts, these are usually conversations about funding, right? They're usually conversations about why funders should fund Black and Brown and other marginalized communities. And it's kind of crazy because these conversations happen about every 5 years or so, as if, the last time we had these conversations, things weren't clear enough, right? But it just keeps coming in these cycles. It goes with, something tragic happens and then people remember like, oh yeah, we should probably fund Black people, or we should fund queer people, or we should fund poor people, right? And then things die down, they forget about us. And then, something happens again. And it's just, even though we have research that has shown the challenges, that we know what's going on, we know about these disparities and inequalities in funding and in the arts, we still have to go through these exhausting and often dehumanizing cycles. And so when we thought about these cycles and we thought about these funding conversations, we realized that what is at the root of these issues is power. There's a power imbalance. And we often place the power within the hands of the funders, the foundations, the ones who hold and control the capital.
But the reality is that while funders get elevated in this way, the real work happens on the ground in our communities. In our communities, we are very aware of the significance of art and culture. We know how vital it is to our lives, our institutions, our movements. We infuse them in our work. We rely on them to do our work. And they're really a part of our care infrastructure and how we make our mark on the world.
And so as we are thinking about these things, we started to imagine how might things be different if there was a shift in power, whereby the power was understood to be held by the communities, right? The cultural workers, the creatives, the artists, rather than funders deciding what art is and who can produce art. It's actually the ways that communities use creative practices and cultural practices to build, to revolutionize, and to transform our world, right? So what if we thought about these things and we place the power there? How might these conversations look differently? How might the things that we do be different, right? How would things be different if we think about funders being made relevant only by the work that they fund?
And so, we don't want to get too carried away on this funding path, but we definitely want you guys to think about these things. But now we're going to go ahead and shift the conversation to center the amazing work that comes out of our communities. We want to highlight the people who actually do the work that changes lives. We're talking about people who are working magic. Okay, because with even the limited resources that we have access to, they make a way to do evolutionary and revolutionary work.
Right. And when it comes to culture and arts contributions of Black people in Chattanooga, there's so much rich history and so much amazing work that's happening right here in this city, right? So we've just had a chance to meet the young men that were a part of the hip hop collective, and really we're excited to hear about all the things that they're doing. But today we want to focus our talk on contributions made by a Black Chattanoogan that goes beyond this Appalachian city.
And when we say beyond, I mean, we mean nationally and even on a global scale. I don't know any Black American who is not familiar with the Negro National Anthem titled Lift Every Voice and Sing. We might not know all the words, but we all know somebody that can sing that song and bring you to tears.
It's definitely an emotion-inducing experience to hear the song, right? It gives us a sense of pride and hope as Black people who are living in America. And we know the challenges that we face as Black folks in America. And I think that what people usually don't know about the song is that a Black Chattanoogan gave us the version that we all know and love.
That's right. Lift Every Voice and Sing, which is often affectionately referred to as the Black National Anthem or the Negro National Anthem, whichever way. It was written in 1900 by James Weldon Johnson and composed in 1905 by his brother J. Rosamond Johnson. But a little over 50 years ago, Chattanooga native Dr. Roland Carter, who actually grew up in a segregated Black community during Jim Crow and whose musical talent was cultivated and supported in his community, did the arrangement of the song that we all know. I think we're going to play a little clip of that.
Yes. Know the song. We've all heard it. You know, many of us grew up, if you attended Black schools especially, you grew up singing the song at school, or at least, if not every day, definitely on special occasions, we heard the song, we sang the song. I know for me, when I was in high school, we were assigned to learn and recite the song in my 9th grade English class. I will never forget it, Mr. Ingram's class. And you know, being someone who migrated to the United States only a few years earlier, it's definitely something that I think about when I think about my experience of developing an African-American identity.
Wow, and Keshi, that's pretty amazing. Thank you for reminding us of the impact arts and culture has on our lives. But you know what's really amazing?
What's amazing?
The fact that we have Dr. Carter here with us in the building, ready to share with us today.
How awesome. But it is definitely a pleasure, Dr. Carter, to have you here. Dr. Roland Carter has devoted his life to preserving Black folk music and its identity in African-American culture through his teaching, conducting, composing, and arranging of choral music. He is Professor Emeritus at the University of Chattanooga. Please help me in welcoming to the virtual stage, Dr. Roland Carter.
Thank you.
And we're so excited to jump into some questions with you. One of the things that we want to kick off the conversation with is really kind of thinking about your childhood. Can you tell us a little bit about where in Chattanooga you grew up and how arts and culture shaped the community that you lived in?
Well, I grew up in an area called Bushtown. I was born in the house that's still there.
Wow.
And I spent all of my life until my parents died. Even when I came back 30 years later in 1989 to the university, my parents were still living in the home place. So Bushtown, and the main part about this is that I composed a piece called Common Ground. And the reason I called it Common Ground was because just across in front of my house was Warner Park. Warner Park used to be the white amusement park. Mm. So I could sit there and look and see the ball games and all the fairs. And when they had the state fairs, Blacks had one night a week that they could go to the state fair at Warner Park. But now, mind you, Chattanooga had a Black amusement park, Lincoln Park. Mm-hmm. So we had our own park, but everything was separate. So I composed this piece, Common Ground, because it said we were in an area together, but not together.
Right.
You know, right. And that was an important part. But growing up in Chattanooga, I started my music studies probably around the age 5. My mom tells me I used to come home from church at the age of 4 and climb up on the piano stool and try to play what I had heard in church. So that was where they recognized that I may have had a little talent. Music was all around me. My aunt was a gospel choir, had a group called Wings Over Dixie, a group of ladies who sang gospel music all over the South. And they rehearsed at my house every night, every Monday night. Mm-hmm. And so I've had it, my brothers and sisters, I'm the last of 5. My brothers and sisters all took piano. I think East Side was sort of centered or considered a kind of, quote, uppity part of the Black community, but no, but sincerely, we were all made to take piano lessons. That was something everybody did, as growing up as kids. So that's how I got started, and I had a neighborhood teacher, Alma Stovall. I think she must have taught every Black person in Chattanooga, because you had to wait forever to get a lesson whenever you had that. There was no appointment. If you lesson at 3:00 after school, I get home 6:30, 7 o'clock for dinner, and it was less than 5 blocks from my house. But that's where she taught an awful lot of people, and it was a great impact on my career as teacher, my first piano teacher.
And thank you for sharing that experience with us. Can you share any more specific stories on how art and cultural workers in your community inspired your work?
Oh, yes, indeed. My first grade teacher, elementary music teacher, Janie Holder, was a graduate of Hampton University. So little did I know about that during elementary school, but I do know one thing about Janie Holder. She had long hair down her back and was a pretty lady. So that was, but a fine music teacher also. And she got me involved in an awful lot of things. I remember one of the things she got me involved was a competition with the Chattanooga Symphony. It was a question among elementary, junior high school kids from public schools in Chattanooga, and I was only the minority student who was participating at that time, and won my first LP from the Chattanooga Symphony, the Unfinished Symphony of Schubert, as a second prize winner. I didn't win the contest, but, and then there were all kinds of other things. I mean, there was soprano Mary Robbs, who was a great soprano from Chattanooga. And of course, we grew up with all the music on M.L. King. I played in a little rock and roll band, and we used to do dances at what used to be the YWCA, which is the building which still stands on Magnolia and 8th Street. And they had a little gym there, and we used to have dances on Saturday night, and my little band would be playing. And so I did that. I had a brother who played piano on M.L. King in a couple of the clubs. So there was great influences in my life. My high school teacher was a Hampton graduate, Mrs. Simmons. She literally deposited me on the campus of Hampton. Wow. I mean, she put me in her 1955 Mercury and group and drove me right to Hampton. So, and there were teachers all over Chattanooga. The thing is important that education was more family oriented. It was indeed a community, and how one learned about art and about everything in life. I mean, I was a Boy Scout, I was a Cub Scout, I was also active in the youth NAACP. I was really active in an awful lot of things. My first church job was around the corner from where I lived. And the church is no longer there, but a new building is there, Clegg's Chapel, which is right on East 3rd Street. I was playing Sunday school there from the age 8 through high school. So that was my first church job. Yeah. 50 cents a Sunday. When you say you played Sunday school, what did you do? Did you play the piano? Played the piano, yeah, for the hymns and the singing and the singing that was going on in the Sunday school. And then after that, which was usually around 9:30 to 10:30, then my father would drive by in the truck, pick me up, and take me to the South Side, where we attended church regularly, well, the family church service was going at St. Paul AME, which is right on 25th and William Street, right down the street from the Howard School. And eventually there, I became a choir director at 15 years old. I was choir director of the senior choir at St. Paul. So I've had, the church contributed significantly to my my growing up.
And you mentioned about the NAACP just now, and I know that you grew into adulthood during the Civil Rights Movement. Can you talk a little bit about how arts and culture serve the objectives of the Civil Rights Movement?
Well, of course, the music of the movement was very, very, very important because it was the spiritual. You had all the spirituals that were used. Ain't nobody gonna turn me around, the marching song. So that was an important part. And also in terms of preserving the spiritual, so my commitment was there. Also, every meeting opened with the Lift Every Voice and Sing. That was the opening hymn, and the closing hymn was We Shall Overcome. So that was every meeting, every civil rights meeting everywhere in the country. I mean, it became a universal thing to sing Lift Every Voice and to close with the We Shall Overcome. That part of music was an important part to the civil rights movement. You can see demonstrations today for anything, and they will strike up on the spiritual about their rights. So that had a great influence, the music of this area.
Do you think that there are lessons that we can learn in contemporary movements from the civil rights movements as it relates to the use of arts, of the songs, of culture, things like that?
Well, indeed, we have, and we do. We had all those wonderful singers, those blues singers, those rhythm and blues singers who were active and participating. But a very important song in terms of the civil rights movement and what was happening in the world, even with the blues singer, Lady Holiday, I think it was, did one of those songs. And of course, we had Bessie Smith out of Chattanooga singing the blues, and the impressions all around out of Chattanooga off of 9th Street, and they were all singing songs that were not only of the Black movement, but also about man's inhumaneness to man. And it's important that the music continues to be an important part. Even the rap, the hip hop is important in the rights movement. So all types of music are being used in that way.
And just to switch gears a little bit, I know that you said, the NAACP used the song to open up their meetings, but what was your first introduction to Lift Every Voice and Sing?
Elementary school, in the 1940s and 50s and the 40s. You would sing My Country 'Tis of Thee every morning. We used to have devotions, so we would open up school with, you would have My Country 'Tis of Thee, you would have prayer, you have pledge to the American flag, a pledge to the Christian flag. I mean, you did all of that. And then you would might sing the Star Spangled, the first verse of Star Spangled Banner, and then you would sing Lift Every Voice and sing. I mean, you do this every morning. So that's how you knew. And you had to learn all three verses. You couldn't just get away with one. You had to learn all three verses of Lift Every Voice and Sing. I mean, we would sing songs to open up Boy Scout meetings, because all of those activities were so related to the church. That became a part. We would sing it in Boy Scout meeting or Cub Scout meeting. And then, of course, with the youth meetings in the evening at the church. Lift Every Voice was a song for special occasions, but we sang it at most gatherings, and not just special occasions, but when people got together. And we used to have Sunday afternoon programs at churches now. We don't have those anymore like we used to. You spend all day Sunday in church. You couldn't even think about going to a movie. Not on Sunday.
Yeah. Well, so you grew up singing the song at school. What inspired you, or why did you decide to do your arrangement? Where did that come from?
Well, let me go back and let me remind you. I was part of the 1960 class of Howard School, which was responsible for the sit-ins here in Chattanooga. I participated a little bit, and I don't want to romanticize this thing, but my mama told me to bring my butt home. You know, so I get off the bus and go through the store, through Cresses, the downtown 5 and Dime store right there at ML King, and right there where Miller Plaza, the old Miller Plaza stage is. You know, the store was right in that area. And I'd go right through the front door and out the back door and go get the bus and get my butt home, like my mom told me. So she worked from some very prominent people, and it was important to her that I not be involved in that. Oh, she was afraid of you losing her job and doing that. But the song became important to me. And also, I must say, there's another spot I was involved in, which was not very well known around here, but there was an area up on the side of Mount Eagle called Highlander Folk School.
You know about the Highlander?
You know Highlander Folk School?
We love Highlander.
Okay. I attended Highlander in 1957 with Septima Clark and some of those other people. Yeah. And the guy out of Clinton, Tennessee, who was the first to the high school there. Yeah. He was there that summer, and Eleanor Roosevelt was there that summer. So I was a part of that camp that summer, 57 or 58, somewhere around there. Before it moved, I think it moved to Knox County.
Yeah, it's near Knoxville now. Yes.
So you know about Highlander. So I was involved in all of that. So you can see that this song had great meaning to me. The reason I chose to do this, I was invited back to Chattanooga after going to Hampton and becoming choir director at Hampton. And I was invited, my high school teacher, as I say, she deposited me there, but she and another teacher, they opened the high school, Riverside High School opened about 6 or 7 years after I left Chattanooga, 1960. I think Riverside must have opened around 65 or 66. And one of my teachers, so there were 2 high schools for Blacks before the integration of the school. So they invited me back, being a new choir director, college choir director, to direct the 2 high school choirs together in 1970. Now, I was doing this piece, I was going to write this arrangement for those 2 choirs, but time ran out and I didn't get to finish it during that time. So I didn't finish it till 4 years later. But the important thing here is that we as choir directors, or we had learned to open programs with certain songs. Most choral programs would close with a big rendition of Battle Hymn of the Republic. You know, the choirs were singing glory, glory, hallelujah. And I decided I wanted to end with something else, something more. And the song had much more meaning to me. And of course, this was the time of the Vietnamese War. And I was very sensitive with my work with NAACP and the Civil Rights Movement. This was also about man's inhumaneness to man, not just here in this country, but all over the world. And it was a song, and I thought Lift Every Voice was a song and text that could have meaning for everybody, not just the Black national anthem. So I wanted everybody to learn and know this song. I don't know if people know, many people who have been in choirs and know the arrangements of Battle Hymn that we used to sing in choirs, that there's a real relationship of my arrangement of Lift Every Voice and Sing to the old arrangements of the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Actually, I use those as a model for my arrangement.
Well, you know, speaking about the impact the song has had, your arrangement of it, right? I know that last year, I feel that the NFL decided that they wanted to use it to open this year of football. And we know all of the problematics with the NFL, right? And, you know, there's so much of what we see coming out of Black people's struggles and tragic things that happen is symbolic gestures. How do you feel about this song and your arrangement of it in particular being used as a part of this?
Well, let me clear.
Okay.
Now, my arrangement necessarily was not the arrangement. I mean, it was one of the ones that was used. Actually, the big game was it the Super Bowl? Was that,
Yeah,
something
Alicia
very young.
Keys sang
They
it,
used
yeah.
that. Clark Atlanta University opened the Super Bowl with my arrangement of it.
Okay.
But back in October, they were just going to use the song.
Okay.
So the problem with my arrangement is that it would take 6 minutes to to do the whole thing.
Get through it.
So they weren't going to do that every game.
Okay.
And they would need a choir that could sing. I mean, really sing.
That can be hard to find.
I mean, to get it done. But the Clark Atlanta, that was exciting to get them. And they had to do some cuts to it, but they were tastefully done. And those kids looked great. It was a very exciting time when I was just excited. I was in tears watching them during the opening of the Super Bowl. I had some issues or concerns. I don't know how they were going to be sure that people knew words or if they were going to know them. If they're going to do it, I want to see the words up on the big screen so everybody know what they're singing about. But to do one verse would not dare embrace the nature of what that song is all about. Because, Johnson, not only, he didn't really cast aspersions on Americans or the white Americans, but he made reference to those things that had caused us to want or have the hope that we had. And it wasn't a put down. He just made the history apparent to everybody, And therefore, I felt comfortable that people of all races could embrace that as part of history and sing the song. So that's where it goes, because the first verse is all about dreaming of hope, rising sun till victory is won, Then the second verse goes home and tell you about you beating us with them, with the whips and all of the things on the father's side and all of that. But then the third verse is the one where Dr. Lowry gave the benedictory prayer at Obama's inauguration, God of our weary years. And that's I call that third verse James Weldon Johnson's eighth trombone. I don't know if you know James Weldon Johnson. He has a set of poems, God's trombones, ministers of prayers and sermons. And I call this really the eighth trombone, the trombone being the preacher. And the God of our weary years, God of our silent tears. I use that as an old deacon praying. And that verse, he goes through all of this stuff, calling on the Lord and telling him how good he is, where he been and brought us through all of these things. But it gets all the way down to a one-line prayer. He starts out, God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hasn't said a word yet, thou who is by thy might let us into the light, the prayer. Keep us in the path that we pray. That's the main line of that whole thing. Yeah. And it goes on from there. I'm sorry.
No, that's excellent. I mean, that's a great breakdown of the verses of the song. And we definitely appreciate that.
So you mentioned, a little bit about the impact that it's had on people, the song, but did you, when you first arranged this piece, did you think that it would have such a large impact on people?
I had no idea. The real big performance that I remember was in 1974 at a national conference of musicians. Actually, the National Association of Negro Musicians allowed me to introduce it then to the conference in San Francisco. And it just went over so big. People embraced it. And then I submitted it to a company to be published, Yeah. But they were interested in it in 1974. But they gave me permission to publish it myself. So I self-published it and started my own publishing house in 1978. it took me 4 years to get that done. And so happy to say, I must say that now my company I started for the preservation and publication of music by Black composers and Black traditions is now published by one of the largest. My catalog is now released by one of the largest music publishers in the country.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So I want to switch gears back again. And you've been back in Chattanooga for, 30 years?
30, yeah, actually, 31.
31 years.
32. 32. 89, 32 years,
So you've seen a lot. You've seen a lot of changes in Chattanooga.
I have indeed. I came back at the time of the Renaissance.
Okay.
That's when we began with all the things downtown, the Discovery Museum and all of that, and being on the boards and of all these various developmental associations. I also served on Tennessee Arts Commission Board, and I had the pleasure of being on Allied Arts Board. But I feel a very important part of what has gone on and what happened. And I must say also that I had, having grown up in Chattanooga in the 40s and 50s, big segregation, had our Black theaters down on ML King, and, you knew where you could go, where you weren't supposed to go, but to come back. And when I left in 1960, I graduated from high school, I couldn't go to school. I couldn't go to University then Chattanooga. I could not. But 30 years later, 29 years later, I could come back as head of the Department of Music at an institution that I couldn't go to. So that was a thrill. Now, that wasn't just an answer in itself now, not by any means, because there were still things happening. we're still fighting the battle now. I'm not going to make it pretty. It still takes a lot to fight the battle. I'm in the middle of writing a new piece of music now in honor of John Lewis. And that piece of music says, make some noise, get in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble, silence no more. You still got to speak, talk about it.
I agree. And, I think about, we're definitely seeing, I think, in many parts of our region, this sort of infusion of arts and activism, right? Can you talk a little bit about what that scene is like currently in Chattanooga? What are we seeing here?
Well, actually, I'm sort of out of the scene now. Being the retired person, enjoying being retired. Do you hear me? I don't do anything, don't want to do anything, okay?
Yeah, you did your part, okay? You have contributed.
No, but it's unfortunate that I don't keep up with as much as what's happening now, but I'm happy to see what is happening. That's really exciting. And to see what happened, I think there was a business, even with the Hunter Museum, had a group of young businessmen getting together and being proactive about it. It's not just about demonstrating or doing, it's about enlightening and educating people of all races. To make people aware of what's going on and helping to teach and educate. If we demonstrate without educating, then we're going to be here another 400 years talking about this later, what we should have done.
You sit on a lot of the boards, or you have sat on a lot of the boards. What do you see as some of the challenges that are facing Black organizations or minority arts organizations or people, cultural workers today from the funding perspective?
Well, I don't know. And maybe having grown up the way I did and seeing what I see, we need to educate people about costs in the arts. And for artists, we used to doing things and getting it free. And much of that has to come through the culture, that there's been a cultural thing that has influenced us. And much of that is the church. It's free. You understand? And much of it is to get people to understand that they can too. We just don't want people to give to us, but Blacks are capable, and many of them have the wherewithal to contribute too. And we need to expand the base of giving in our community. We can't not just keep asking to get it, but we need to contribute and we need to educate people to make contributions to the arts.
And so I'm thinking, what do you think that emerging artists need but aren't getting to cultivate their inspiration and be successful and to contribute?
Oh, there's some great things happening. I'm not sure. Emerging artists have many, many opportunities, but what happens is that they don't take advantage of the opportunities to do that. Well, the educational opportunities, and by that I mean the lessons that they need. They can do things naturally, but they won't refine them. I've offered lessons to people who play for churches, gospel music and free, and tell them, I'll teach you free, so you can learn to read and improve what you do. No, but they're too content with what they're able, because people will build them up and tell them, oh, you're good, and they go without getting a deep education and training. We have to impress upon young people the importance of study. That's so crucial. And whether you want to be jazz, rhythm and blues, or whatever, it's not. Studying doesn't say you being classic, in that way, or that it has to be the classical arts, but it embraces all arts. I mean, I see the wonderful things that happen. I drive down 11th Street or 10th Street over here, and you see the Mirage. I remember when Howard School put the Mirage out there, River Road, right across the street from the emissions thing, their whole thing of high school students. I was part of Allied Arts when they were doing that. But there's art all over here.
Right.
And we got to get some of these kids out of these communities. There's still kids who have not been downtown Chattanooga who live around here.
Right. Now, do you think it's a kind of understanding of art as one thing, right? Like you mentioned the classics, right? So that it's only when it's produced this way that it is art. And so people sort of separate themselves from that. They don't feel like they fit into that box.
Well, it's a separation of the fact that the folk traditions are not always embraced or giving the name of art,
right.
We may use the process, we may use painting, drawing, but we don't classic into or playing an instrument, but we don't always refer to it as an art. And so we need to educate. Again, it's a big process. I'm old-fashioned.
Well, I know this has been great. Is there anything that we didn't ask that you want to share about any of the above, any of the things that we talked about?
I can't think of it. You've been fairly thorough with me, catching me off guard here, making me think deeply. No, thank you for the opportunity of being here. I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you.
I should have had the list of questions before.
Next time I will be sure to send them off. But we are so grateful for you for sharing your time with us and coming in to do this in person with us. We really appreciate it.
Is it over already? I was worried about being able to talk for 40 minutes.
We're almost there. We're wrapping up now.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
This has been such a wonderful and informative conversation. I hope that everyone's spirit has really been fed in the way that mine has.
For sure.
Dr. Carter, thank you so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to speak with us and our virtual audience.
Thank you.
For sure. We would definitely like to engage the audience if there's time for that. Before we get to something like that, if there's time, we do have to make a shameless plug for our work. If you like what you've heard today and want to hear more similar stories, other stories from the region, please be sure to download the Black in Appalachia podcast wherever you get podcasts. We are on all of the platforms. Also follow us on the socials. We are Black in Appalachia on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and TikTok now.
A little bit of TikTok.
And all the other places.
You can also send us an email for more information about our podcast. the podcast at blackandappalachia.org. And we also have a website, blackandappalachia.org. We try to keep it simple and easy for everybody to remember.
For sure. Make sure you subscribe and follow. Also, leave us reviews and share the podcast with somebody else. Again, I'm Nkechi Elamine, and you can follow me on Sewing Sociologist on Instagram.
I'm Alana Norwood, and you can find my work on the Black and Appalachia website.
We want to definitely shout out the Arts Build crew. Shout out to James.
Shout out to Monica and Stratton. He's been great.
And Ben.
Yeah, and Ben. Thank you guys so much for helping us facilitate this conference and being a part of it.
Again, we want to shout out Chef Kenyatta for the amazing dinner that we had last night. And if we missed anyone, thank you all for making this all happen. It was a pleasure being here.
From PRX.